welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. We have had a huge response to this particular webinar, so thank you all for signing up. My name is Allison LaFerlita. I'm the Executive Director for the Nonprofit Resource Hub. We are a professional association that provides services, goods, and support to the nonprofit community. And if you are a nonprofit organization joining us for the first time and you are not a registered nonprofit partner, please head on over to our website after the webinar and register. It is free for you to join, and you are able to take advantage of great things like this webinar and tremendous resources and support from our associate members. So please go ahead and do that. This afternoon, again, like I said, we had a huge response to this. We are presenting a little privacy please, diving into data privacy for nonprofits. We know this is a very sometimes overwhelming and confusing topic for those of us that are in the nonprofit industry and are busy often keeping the lights on and raising money and doing all the other things that we're doing. But that is why we have Kim Snyder here and Joshua Peskay from RoundTable Technologies. They are going to help simplify this, help you understand it. And afterwards, if you have further questions or would like to talk to them in depth about this, you are welcome to reach out to them. Everybody's contact information will be in the chat. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Kim and Josh.
Welcome to a little privacy please. And who are we? RoundTable Technology, we are a strategic partner, and we love to help nonprofit organizations leverage technology to do what you do better, more securely, more reliably, and basically just amplify your efforts in the best way that we can. For us, technology is not the thing that matters. It's the work that you do that is the thing that matters, but technology can be a huge help in getting you there. And unfortunately, a lot of time it can be a hindrance. And so we want to make sure it's a help and not a hindrance. Kim, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that about says it.
All right. And I don't know if we have slides about us. We do. All right. So I'm Joshua Peskay. My title is 3CPO. I'm not going to get into it, but if anyone wants to know what the heck that means, you can ask me, or you can go to my LinkedIn page with this little explanation. Kim.
Hi, Kim Snyder, not as enigmatic. I'm VP of Data Strategy at RoundTable Technology.
So let's get into our first engagement. So we'll see if folks have been able to Menti. So the instructions, again, are right up there at the top of the screen for those of you who weren't able to get in or have come late to the webinar. You're going to want to go if you want to engage in this little kind of elaboration. Oh, yeah, we don't need the Zoom poll, actually, so we can drop that out. Unless we want to do both, I guess. Yeah, no, just do the Menti one, I think is good. So yeah, go ahead and engage with Menti. So we want to know what best describes your relationship with your organization's data. Are you a parent to guardian, long-term committed relationship, frenemies, casual acquaintances, or an absolute stranger? I am definitely frenemies with RoundTable's data. Kim, how would you describe yourself?
Long-term committed relationship. Never.
Oh, really? See, I see you as kind of like a parent frustrated by their adolescent children. the data being those misbehaving children who you love them, they're great, you want the best for them, but boy, are they a mess sometimes, right?
The long-term committed relationship, and I'm really at RoundTable these days. I am while I can want to be the parent or guardian, the meddling parent, I think those who are guardians prefer me to just be in a long-term committed relationship.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like people are kind of gradually getting into Menti, and we've got folks that are we got all over. Fortunately, no one here is a complete stranger to their data, which I guess that's a good thing. So we'll truck along. There'll be a few more of these Mentis as we go through it, and they'll get more complicated in terms of engaging with them, but hopefully fun.
More fun. Yes.
Yeah. All right, Kim. I think this is
alrighty. So why privacy? Why now? Okay. First, before we move on, there's a little bird on this slide. Whenever you see that little bird, that's to say that there is stuff here and resources. So we have a lot of resources for you to use. We're going to be giving you a lot of information today, and don't expect you to memorize it or be taking notes. So know that we have resources, and you can go to nonprofitit.com /privacy stuff and get the stuff. Okay, so why privacy and why now? Okay, well, two really three, but two for now. Main reasons, okay, legislation, and that is in the US, and this is primarily a US based audience, but in the US, there has been an uptick in the amount of data privacy laws, okay? And we're seeing them being passed in states all around the country, and including, as you can see, New York is blue. So that means that there is currently legislation in committee, and we can expect as the legislative session moves on to be seeing more of those states turn blue, because we're still pretty much at the start. Okay, so that's reason number one. There are laws coming to a state near you soon. And the other side of it is cybercrime. And over the COVID years, there's been a huge uptick in cybercrime, which was already escalating. But COVID, we really saw an expansion of cybercrime. And I read a statistic this morning, actually, Josh, and this is due to some AI increases in availability of AI tools. Phishing attempts, so that's a certain type of cyber attack, are up 61% in the second half of 2022. I don't know if that's a real fact, but anyway, so we should not expect cybercrime to, we don't expect those bars to go in the reverse direction at all. It's just going to grow. So these two things coupled together, along with, and on the next slide.
By the way, those bars are trillions in the T. And just to give you a sense of like the amount of money that we're talking about here, if things continue along the path, which so far they are, that means that basically the amount of cybercrime gets close to the total national debt of the United States in terms of what's being stolen annually through cybercrime, to give you some sense of how large of an amount we're talking about here.
It is a business.
It's a good one. I mean, not for us, but
For some people.
for the criminals. Yeah.
Yes.
Quite lucrative.
So when we think about laws in the US, okay, so I was saying earlier that, you know, we're starting to see laws at the state level crop up. We've had privacy laws. They've just been entirely sector focused and all about protecting data that's used by certain industries like healthcare or banking or certain populations like children who are under age 13, right? The COPPA law, right? So our laws for the most part have been sector focused, but along comes, and this is clicking the slide, along comes GDPR. And where GDPR, now that passed in 2018, so that was a while ago, and that passed and applies to residents of the EU, not just citizens, but residents. So if you happen to be there for a while and giving someone your data, it's protected under GDPR, even if you're not a citizen. But what GDPR is, it's not sector focused, it's person focused. So it really kind of shifts the paradigm around privacy and makes, instead of protecting data in certain industries, it's about my rights as a person if I give you my data. So it's about an individual right. It sees privacy as an individual human right. Okay, so that was 2018. So why are we thinking about that so much now is that GDPR is really the foundation for state privacy legislation that's coming up. It's all borrows from GDPR, as well as any of the privacy legislation that we see cropping up in other countries. And it's important to remember, especially in a more boundaryless internet-driven world, that it's not so much where your business or your organization is, it's who you're serving, whose data you're collecting when you start to think about these laws. So I'm going to talk a little bit in the next few slides about these individual privacy rights. And there are a total of 8 of them, and that's a resource, little bird. And I'm going to go through in the next slide, I'm going to highlight a subset of these. So if you click on the next one. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about each one of these on the right, the ones that are in blue, because these are the ones that apply mostly to nonprofits. Though I will say that the privacy rights around artificial intelligence are going to crop up more and more as nonprofits start using it more and more. So I'm just going to walk quickly through the types of privacy rights that GDPR gives to an individual. And we need to think in terms of, as an organization, can we fulfill these rights when we collect a person's data? So if you go to the next slide, I think starting the first one, the right of information means I have the right to know what is being collected and why. And I think it's the why that's different. Like if I'm giving you my data, you think, well, you know what's being collected, but why? How is it being used? Is it being used for any other purpose than what I think I'm giving it to you for? Right. And so that's where things like consents and privacy notices come in, the right of information. So if you go to the next one, I'm just going to buzz through these quickly because we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to familiarize you with the types of things we need to start doing if we're going to collect people's data, which most organizations do. The right of access means that if I've given you my data, I have the right to ask for it and obtain it, and you have to be able to provide it to me, right? So that starts to get into a certain level of ability in terms of data management. If I give you my data, do you know where it is, right? And adding to that, the right of erasure, the right to be forgotten or deleted, adds a new twist to that. So if I've given you my data and I don't want you to have it anymore, and you're not legally obligated to keep it. So if I gave you a donation, you have to keep that data for, I believe it's 7 years, right? Because of financial records, right? That's a legal basis for keeping data, if I were to say delete it, or medical records. But if you're not keeping it for any of those reasons, and I want you to delete my data, the right of erasure says that you need to be able to delete it everywhere. Okay. So that's, and going on to the next few rights, I'd say the right of erasure is the one that gets people the most, but the right of rectification is similar. It's that I can request it and I can get it corrected. So if the data that you have about me is wrong, that I have a right to ask that it be corrected. I have a way to ask you to correct it. And that when you correct it, I get a verification that you have corrected it. Okay. And that's really the last one, which is the right of notification, which is, if I make one of these requests, I have the right to be notified that you've complied with it, right? So if you've deleted my data, it's not just assumed that, okay, it's not there anymore, so I can't show it to you. But I'm notified that, yes, in fact, we received your request and we deleted the data. And in fact, there's certain turnaround times, and those turnaround times can vary in terms of how long you have to delete something, as well as how long to respond. Yes, we received your request. So there is a process around doing these types of things. This is still relatively new to a lot of organizations. And I think on the next slide, you go to what's
I kind of wanted to ask in the chat if, unless that's later, Kim.
That's later.
That's later. Okay. No problem. All right. Then I will pick it up from here. All right. So let's think about what constitutes private information. So when we think about what is sensitive or what is private information, to what degree is this defined, right? And so one of the things about these data privacy laws that differ from other kinds of data protections, we're not talking about intellectual property. We're not talking a lot about kind of organizational strategic secrets. We're talking about, it's not information that belongs to an organization. It's information that fundamentally belongs to individuals. And what these laws do is create, right, protection for individuals of the data that companies have about them. So they're saying it's not the company that owns the data. The company is kind of borrowing the data from you, and they have to take care of it in certain ways. And so that information, there's identifying information, you know, your name, your birthday, the stuff that I would use to figure out who you are. There's sensitive information that I could use to do identity theft, like social security or financial information, or authentication, like biometric information that I could use to authenticate as you. And then there's special category, which is sometimes, you know, in the other referred to as psychometric sometimes. So that's ethnicity, political orientation, philosophical beliefs, sexuality, other things like that. And this is all information that, you know, if you read anything about some of the Cambridge Analytica, and other companies that function as these data brokers that have been collecting all the time. But now there are laws that actually have some teeth to them to kind of protect people. And actually Meta, more commonly known as Facebook, got hit with almost a $500 million fine by the EU. And when you think about, well, what are we doing to protect this data? All right. There's something that's referred to as a reasonableness standard. Okay, so if I give Kim a bunch of my information 5 years ago because I donate to her organization, all right, and then 5 years later there's a breach, I would like to know, from Kim, what data of mine, did you have, and what did you do to protect it? And given that I made this donation to you 5 years ago and I haven't had anything to do with you since then, why did you still have my data?
Legally, I might be required, but if it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years, 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Or if I wasn't legally required to keep this information about you, why did you still have it? And if you can't, so again, if you have a legal reason to have it, that's reasonable, right? You have a reason that you can point to that another person would say, yeah, that's reasonable. But if you can't, if none of these things are defensible in any reasonable mindset by your organization, then that's, not going to look good for you if someone does decide to litigate. And now is the question we want to throw into the chat, which is, has anyone who's here in this webinar today received what's referred to as a data subject access request, or a DSAR, which is an email that might look like this, that says, based on my legal rights, I would like to know what you have about me, and I might want you to delete all of it. And I would like to know if anybody has received one of these at your organization.
And it's possible that in terms of who's here today, no one has gotten one of these, or your organization may have gotten one and not sure quite where it's gone to. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that can happen.
Seems like no one yet. You will. You're going to get these. We hate to be the bearers of bad news, but they are coming. All right. Is this still Mika?
That's still you and then me.
No problem. All right. So when we think about one of the fundamental rights that was established through GDPR, in which many of the data privacy laws that are kind of spreading across the United States. So of course, the United States, EU did what's mostly considered the gold standard around data privacy laws, which is GDPR, the General Data Protection Rule. Sometimes the regulation, I forget if it's a rule or regulation, but GDPR. And what's happened is, of course, the federal government of the United States can't get it together to pass anything nationally. So the states are just all doing their own thing. Some of them are doing nothing. Some of them, like California, are putting in pretty stringent data privacy laws, pretty robust ones. New York put in a very kind of common sense data privacy law. But the bummer is that they're kind of all doing different things, all right? But what almost all of them have in common is this idea of the right to be forgotten, meaning I should be able to contact anyone who has sensitive data about me and say, I would like you to delete that data. And you have to be able to delete it from all the places that it might exist, which as soon as you start to think about that, even a little bit, you realize how hard that is, right? Because if 10 years ago I made a donation to Kim's nonprofit, and Kim's administrative assistant downloaded a spreadsheet from Salesforce last year of all of the people because she was working on some project, and that's still sitting on her workstation. Well, even once you delete me out of Salesforce, I'm still sitting there in a spreadsheet on the administrative assistant's desktop computer. By the way, if that's getting backed up somewhere, I'm also now in that backup. And both of those are things that ultimately could be breached, could be compromised. And everywhere else that data went in the meantime, and all the backups of those places where that data went. So this starts to make your head hurt after a bit. And the advice we sort of tend to give people is, don't worry as much about going back in time and fixing all these problems, but start to think about putting in place retention policies and practices that actually allow you to do this in a meaningful way, and make sure that you don't get this data sprawl everywhere, because this is pretty tough. All right, so Kim, back to you.
Okay, so this is me. And I just
Yeah.
want to say, because there was a comment that nonprofits aren't covered by the California law. I think it's businesses, does target commercial businesses, especially social media, because it's California, but up to 25 organizations over 25 million annual revenues actually would be, I think could be. But here's the thing, and what I'm just about to talk to about data management is this is the way things are going. So while many organizations are probably okay and not going to get in trouble, and I realize this seems like the bad news webinar, this is more a sign of things to come and ways that we need to start thinking about our data differently in a world where data privacy matters. And that's just where things are headed. Partly things like Cambridge Analytica have made people a lot more conscious of their data being collected. So if you go to the next slide, how we think of this is there's been a premise change. So where 10 years ago, we thought of data and everyone heard data is the new oil, collect as much of it as you can. It's got value, right? So we heard a whole lot of that 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And if you move forward on the slides, the premise for that has changed. And this is actually a quote from Joshua, but which is why I gave myself this slide, probably, Josh.
Yeah. Are we allowed to quote ourselves in our own webinar?
But it is true. We need to start thinking about data differently rather than our organization's data, right? We're really licensing this stuff from people to the extent that we're talking about people's information, the kinds of data Josh described a few slides ago. And so that means the data, holding on to this, it's both an asset. Yes, it is still valuable and still, can yield, lots of, revenue and volunteers and things like that. But it's also a liability. So it makes us think about how long we hold on to it and what we do with it when we hold on to it. So the best kind of foot forward, and I agree 1000% with Josh saying this isn't so much go back and look at your data from 10 years ago. I mean, if you're still using that data today, then it should be looked at. But
or you're incredibly ambitious and have nothing better to do.
Nothing else to do, which no one on this webinar
kind of
has.
worthless exercise, but it's
But yeah, so going on to the next slide, right? What this in thinking about our data differently, one of the first places to go is with thinking about your data as having a life cycle in your organization, right? And that starts at the point of collection and protecting and accounting for where data goes, who sees it throughout this life cycle is basically what these laws ask us to do, whether it's Connecticut, California, Colorado, EU, Brazil, right? So all through its life cycle with us as an organization, right? Whose data do we collect? How do we get it? How do they give it to us? Is it secure? Do we tell them that we're collecting and how we're going to use it? Next, once we have it, where is this data stored? Is it stored in multiple places? Is it secure? Is it in our Salesforce? Does everyone have access to everything in Salesforce, or is it locked down more? And then how do we make sure that it stays accurate, right? Because right of rectification, I can ask for my records to be corrected. Well, who would do that, right? Do we share data? Because once we share it, then we kind of lose control over it. Do we have consent from people in order to share their data? So, and how do we do that? Is it secure? So we need to ask ourselves these questions throughout the life cycle of that information in our organization. Finally, retention and deletion, right? Now, a lot of nonprofits, most people I talk to are like, we don't delete the data. What do you mean? But again, if data is an asset and a liability, do we want to think about how long we hold on to records past their usefulness, past the legal basis, and past their usefulness to us as an organization? And that does mean having some internal hard questions that involve different stakeholders in the organization to make those decisions. There's no perfect right or wrong answer. The thing is to come up with reasonable answers and processes for your organization. Right. So this is what I think of as data lifecycle management. I think on the next slide, there's a worksheet that is also a resource that you can walk through this type of worksheet, and that this is actually adapted from something created for GDPR, and it walks you through different data subjects. So if you're collecting data from donors, from clients, from volunteers, etc., so you kind of take each category of data subject or individual and ask yourselves these questions. Who are they? Why? And again, that takes you through the life cycle. And getting into the habit of doing that is the start to a data inventory, which is what you need to do if you need to be able to get rid of someone's data, right? So this is the very foundational first step to knowing what you have. You can't protect it if you don't know that you collect it, right? So how am I doing time-wise? Okay, policies and notices. These are other things that nonprofits will need to start thinking about. Internal policies, so we're thinking about a data classification and handling policy would be an example of one of those, is something that gives people internally guidelines for what's okay and what's not okay to do with data. So for in that example that Josh gave earlier about my assistant who downloaded all those donation records, if it was a known policy that you really can't do that, you can only work with these records in Salesforce. And furthermore, you can also set up systems to prevent people from being able to do these things so it doesn't happen. Then, you know, if we don't have those policies, then how does that person know not to do it, or if we're not preventing them? So we need to be able to tell people so that they understand why, because data privacy is something we have to start thinking about as an organization. External notices, so think of those as internal educates the internal personnel, external educates clients, consumers, constituents. And so those are your privacy notices to people, as well as your own statements of accountability, that this is what we do with your data when we collect it. This is how we process it. This is how long we expect to keep it. And you often see those in the form of privacy policies. And we have some good examples of those if anyone wants to see one. Otter AI, I think, is a really good one. Anyway, and so how do we do all this stuff, right? And it really starts with developing a culture of accountability, responsible data governance, data management. And that means someone's overseeing it. It doesn't mean that everyone has to hire a CIO, but it means that some person or team in the organization does have some level of oversight over the data. And then when it moves to departments, yeah, maybe they're data stewards in each of the departments. These are the people who know their own data really well and can tell you what's being collected, why, and who could, complete the data inventory for their specific programs. Often you see this where there are various programs in an organization that use data or might even be collecting it in spreadsheets. That counts, but you want to get these stakeholders and hear it from them, the people that are close to the data. And the governance overall is what gives you these policies, as well as security, the ability to secure your data. And that's also the basis of how you educate people, all right? So it does require some management, and it's easier if it's overseen by a central team. So going on to the next, I think we might have a mentee.
I think we do. Yeah.
I think we have mentee. Okay, so for those of you who joined a little later or who maybe didn't mentee the first time, you can go to mentee.com. Josh put the link in the chat, and put in the code 49430784. And this is kind of a Likert scale, but I think you can put your dot pretty much in. And also,
Strongly agree is off to the right, strongly disagree off to the left.
and yeah, today, the age of data privacy, we can think of it as dawning on the nonprofit community. It's new. This is new stuff, and trying to help organizations get prepared to meet this, right? So it's not like, oh, if you don't have these things in place, there's anything wrong. This is what needs to, the work that needs to be done, right?
And I meant to, you have to hit submit at the bottom. So if people are wondering why their thing isn't going through it, you have to hit submit. And it looks like we're very middling on these across the organizations here. So either, at the end, we'll be able to see where the what the sort of deltas were. You can kind of see it if you look at the shaded area behind the scores, those kind of slopes, that gives you a sense of how the scores are breaking out. So that's sort of the breakdown of where people are scoring. So we've got scores all over the place, but both are trending toward a little bit toward disagreeing. So I would say, dare we say, Kim, we're not at a very high level of data maturity among the audience, which is fine. That's why we're here, right?
Which is why we're here. And I think these are good questions to be asking in one's organization, right? And once we're ready to go on, speaking of data maturity.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so this is another resource as well. This is a nonprofit information privacy maturity guide. And I say information because this also applies to paper records. So I've been asked that question. Is this just digital? No. So this is a roadmap, and a lot of organizations are likely in the reacting the earlier phases with kind of limited, policies aren't really stood up yet across the organization. There might be some security lapses, but moving toward adapting, right? This is very, very much developmental. It is incrementally getting better, not overnight. And I think if you click, you'll see the magic circles will come up, because this is the point Kim will never stop making through my entire professional career. You'll see in the level 2 adapting. So this is where you're starting to put some stuff in place. You're starting to assess what you have. You're starting to pull together an inventory.
By the way, it's almost like if we go back to our engagement, I don't know if I can do that. Let's see if it breaks everything. But 2.5, right, is where everybody landed.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
where are your numbers, right? Right in that middle, right between 2 and 3. So it's almost like you read the minds in advance of the audience, Kim.
Yes, I did. Well, I have these powers, but so you'll see that the 2 circles, okay, adapting is really okay. I mean, this is part of the progress, and that's a lot of organizations where they don't have like an official privacy or data lead, but they have like an accidental techie who fulfills the role of kind of the go-to person around data, right? And so a lot of organizations may have that. Maybe a program person who's just really good at data, or somebody's administrative assistant who's like, okay, I'll take this on, and they become the go-to person. Often privacy practices can start with that person, okay? But then they go, as you kind of go up the maturity road there, having someone whose designated responsibility is more around privacy, so possibly they could even have some education around data privacy as part of that role, is where you start to differentiate. Do we expect organizations to get to level 4? Not really. Is level 2.5 heading to 3? Is level 3 good enough? Probably for most, it's reasonable. Josh is going to talk that concept of reasonableness more in a second. But just remember, this is an evolution. This is not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
So I think
It's a process, not a project, as we say. There is no done with data
It's
privacy.
never done.
Yeah,
You're always
but the
collecting
earlier you put in place a process to continually adapt and review practices, the better that you will be. You know, we thought that we were pretty good with cybersecurity at RoundTable. You know, for a long time, I've been running the cyber team. Probably, I want to say 5 years ago, we had the benefit to have a security team for $1 billion company who happened to be a partner of ours come to New York and offer to do a free penetration test and security evaluation of us. And they came away, they had nice things to say, but they came away and said, the thing you don't have is a security team that's clearly responsible for the security of RoundTable and is meeting regularly and sort of putting together a roadmap and saying, this is what we're doing, these are the vulnerabilities, this is how we're prioritizing. And we established that team on that recommendation, and it has totally transformed RoundTable. And it's the classic thing. You know, overestimate what you can get done in a week and underestimate what you can get done in a year or 5 years. So get the process going and it will get better, we promise. But don't try to boil the ocean today. It's not going to go well. All right, so let's talk about protecting. Protect what you collect. So if I'm going to, right, or if I'm going to give Kim all of my sensitive information, I would like Kim to protect it. And so not only do I want to make sure that she's only getting information about me that she really needs in order to provide the services that I'm asking her to, but I want to make sure that she's not keeping that data longer than she needs. She's not sharing it with people that I didn't, you know, give consent for her to share it with, and she's not being reckless with the protection of my data, because maybe she won't share it with other people on purpose, right? But if she puts all my sensitive information in a spreadsheet, then that is permissioned wrong and searchable via Google, and you know, people find it and download it and publish it on the internet, as happened quite recently with the United States no-fly list, which I don't know about you, seems like a sensitive piece of information. But again, you know, someone was accused of hacking that, but really all they did was find it and download it, right? I mean, that's hard to call that hacking. So that's not protecting it very well. So security is not like, there's nothing that you're going to do that's going to 100% protect you against everything. Okay, it's just not possible. All right, and by the same token, there's no single thing that you do that really is all of your security. The idea is to have these multiple layers. When the pandemic hit, okay, we all learned a lot about how respiratory diseases spread. And if there's any benefit to this, it's that it's a very, very good model for understanding cybersecurity as well, in the sense that there's nothing I'm going to do that is 100% guaranteed to keep me from getting COVID. All right. And if I only wear masks, but I don't get vaccinated, I never wash my hands, I never socially distance, I'm hanging out all the time in, you know, karaoke rooms with no ventilation, with a bunch of sick people, you know, doing karaoke for hours, then the likelihood, of course, that I'm going to get COVID and perhaps get a severe case of COVID is much, much higher. All right. On the other hand, okay, if I wear masks and I wash my hands and I socially distance and I get vaccinated, and I, you know, take reasonable precautions, I'm decreasing the likelihood that I'm going to get COVID, and I'm also decreasing the likelihood that I will get a severe case of COVID. So cybersecurity protections, like what you're looking at here, exactly the same idea. Okay, you're making it less likely that you're going to have some kind of an incident, and you're making it less likely that that incident will be extremely severe, because you're more likely to detect it sooner and you're better prepared to respond to it. And because of other things you've done, the damage that will be caused by that incident will be less than if you hadn't done those things. All right, so we think about it like the Swiss cheese model. Let's talk about this idea of reasonable or not reasonable. Is the engagement next, Kim? I just want to get a sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit before about this idea of the reasonableness standard. This is a legal standard that has a long history. Kudos if anyone can drop in the chat the name of the person who actually is, as far as I'm aware, responsible for the reasonableness standard in law. It's a super cool name. If anyone knows it, drop in the chat. If not, I'll reveal it in a moment, or Kim can, because she knows it. People are probably Googling frantically now. Or do people Google, or do they Bing and ChatGPT now? Are we going to be Binging? soon. That's like a new, is Google getting unverbed? I don't know if that happens. Anyway, so this reasonableness standard, this idea, it's rather than get very complex about it, what I encourage people to do, all right, is just ask yourself the question, like I've been playing out the scenario with Kim. If Kim lost my data, okay, and had to notify me, and I went to Kim and I said, hey, Kim, you're telling me you lost my social security number, my credit card number, is that right? And Kim says, yeah. And I say, okay, so why did you have that? I donated to you 5 years ago. And she says, well, we're actually legally required to keep all that information for 7 years. So yeah, I am aware that that seems like a long time, but we really had it. Someone in the chat is talking about MFA, that is multi-factor authentication, which we'll talk about in a few slides. So no worries there. So that's reasonable, right? Like you had a legal reason to keep it. On the other hand, if she says, I don't know, we just don't delete that stuff, right? That's not really reasonable. That's not a reasonable explanation. So then I say, hey, Kim, what were you doing to protect my data? And Kim's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess we had some passwords maybe, and we tried not to email it around too much, right? That's not reasonable. But if she says, look, we had a whole cybersecurity plan, right? Here it is, right? We were implementing these things along this roadmap over 2 years, and the breach happened, right? And it exploited a vulnerability we knew about, but actually hadn't gotten to yet on our roadmap. And so I'm really sorry, but we just, we were prioritizing as best we could, right? That seems reasonable. So just run it through this kind of reasonableness, right, framework, and I think that will be helpful. And so with that, we want to ask everybody else, where do you think, right, if you had to tell me right now, right, hey, Josh, sorry, but we accidentally lost some of your data and it's now being sold on the dark web, right? And I asked you some of the kinds of questions that I was just gaming out with Kim. Would you feel like your organization is reasonable or not reasonable? And you just place your dot anywhere on this continuum that you feel is appropriate to your organization and hit submit, and we'll just see where the dots land. We'll see if we're overall. By the way, if anyone knew me, I don't know who's in this webinar today. There's got to be a few people that know me. The idea that I'm the one who's sort of demonstrating reasonableness is I think the most ironic possible thing that could be imagined. But anyway, we'll leave that aside. All right,
But
so
it
reasonable.
shows you that anyone can be reasonable, right?
I guess, yeah.
And the name of the person is Learned Hand. And yes, that really is his first and last name.
Yeah.
Reasonableness.
Learned Hand. Everybody can go look that up. And I love it. It's actually it's a neat legal concept. It's almost like the common sense concept. It's like, does this person behave reasonably or not? All right, so a little bit spread out. No one, you know what I like about the audience? I will give kudos to the audience, which is not a single one of you did the wishy-washy, I'm going to drop it right in the middle. Everybody picked a side, and I like that. I always hate when you have like the 5 options and everybody puts 3. So good job, everyone. All right, let's continue along on our session here.
Again, it's an evolution. So for those of you further along, the earlier part is the reasonableness.
Is this still me, Kim?
Yes. So
Okay.
I think you're through the rest.
Oh, I'm to the end. Okay, and I think we're getting close to wrapping up. If
Yeah.
people are wondering, yeah, we're
Yeah.
in the home stretch here. So, all right. So we have a cybersecurity readiness checklist. This is another resource that we have available to you. So if you want to get a sense of your reasonableness based on kind of RoundTable's criteria, this is a nice quick way to do that, and you can get information on that. So we want to make sure you've got access to that. And we want to talk a little bit about this idea of digital trust. And for those of you who know me, there are some kind of modern terms like digital transformation or thought leadership that are terms that kind of make me want to gag a little bit. And I actually really like digital trust as a term because it takes data privacy, cybersecurity, transparency of the organization. What are we collecting? Who are we sharing it with? Are we telling you that? In some cases, even what are we going to do if we get a subpoena? Like if I get a subpoena from a nation state for your data, what data am I going to give up? What data am I not going to give up? There are a lot of companies that I'm seeing that are actually including that on their Trust Center pages. All right. And you're saying Trust Center page, what's that? Well, most nonprofits don't have one, but a lot of big corporations are starting to set up trust centers on their website where you can go and get information about all these things. What certifications do they have? What compliance standards are they following? What are their policies around sharing data? And all of that stuff together, right? What you present to the world. If I'm going to interact with you and give you information, right? And get services from you or give you money, I would like to know how I can trust you, right? And that's what digital trust is really about, is how well can an organization demonstrate transparently to constituents that they can be trusted, right? And your ability to do that, in my, and I think Kim's view, right, is going to become increasingly important over the next few years. All right, and it's kind of about all these things, right? Is our data accurate? Right? Are our services going to be available? Are we going to go down and disappear forever? Are we protecting your information, protecting your privacy? Are we operating with ethics, right? Are we implementing AI systems and using AI in horribly unethical ways? Are we using your data in ethical ways? Are we using automated decision processes that are just reinforcing, systemic, differences in the world and just reinforcing bad things that are already here, right? Are we being transparent about the way we're doing all this? And are we resilient as an organization? Can we withstand a breach, withstand an attack of different kinds, and all of those things? So now our last one that we want to hit on the poll is the next thing that I will do to improve data and privacy practices at my organization is, and this is a different kind of engagement, so you can put dots on as many of these as you like, and we'll kind of see how many dots are here. And again, right at the top of the screen, if you still haven't figured out how to engage with these engagements we're putting up, go to menti.com, enter the code up there. It's not too late. You can do that right now on your phone, and then you'll be able to engage with this. So what you want to do is go pick anything that you will do based on what you've learned here today to improve data privacy practices. So if you think you'll secure leadership support, determine what privacy laws might be relevant to you, identify data owners, inventory data, have a good cry, which is, I think will improve your data a lot, conduct a risk assessment, train staff on cybersecurity, develop a data handling. And if there's other things that you would do, you can drop those in the chat. And actually, we didn't have an MFA slide. So for the person who asked about MFA, it's multi-factor authentication. And essentially, when you log into a system, historically, a lot of people have just used a username and a password. Those are a single factor. They're two different things, but they're both things that you know. If you know it, I can know it, an attacker can know it. So multi-factor means we add other factors. The other two factors, other than things that you know, are things that you have. And most commonly, that's like a smartphone that you'll have a code or something on, or it could be a physical key. And then something that you are, which is biometric authentication. And a point I always like to make is that most of us have used multi-factor authentication for our homes for our entire lives and not really thought about it. If I want to get into Kim's home, I need something that she knows, which is where she lives. And I also need something that she has, which is a key. And if I don't have both of those things, I am not getting into Kim's home. And if I only have one, I'm not getting in, right? Because just going there isn't going to help me, and just having the key without knowing what it's a key for. So it works really well. And yet we decided, for everything online, we'll just have what you know, as long as I know where it is. It's that. All right. So people, you're all very ambitious here.
Yeah, it's an active group, and it's interesting to see that the most, and I'm sorry for those who are going to leave this and cry, but anyway, securing leadership support for privacy is, coming in at kind of the basic thing to do. And it's true. It is, organizational leadership needs to prioritize this. It may come all of a sudden one day after a board meeting, though, or it may come when someone has to renew an insurance policy or a contract with a partner, and they say, oh, will you sign this privacy thing? We need to ask all of our partners to do that. So leadership, those types of things will get more buy-in from leaders. Oh, and there's Justin here. This is the Justin slide, but yeah, if you
Oh, is
go,
he supposed to talk on this one?
well,
Is he here?
I'll talk. If
Yeah,
you,
you talk.
nonprofitit.com privacy stuff. That's where you can get all these resources that the where the little bird was. Oh, hi, Justin. You can say this instead of me. Anyway, and you can email us at outreach@roundtabletechnology.com. We realize this has been a lot of information. Okay, so that's why all the resources, this is part of a conversation. It's developmental, incremental, and it will not happen overnight. And, you know, we're happy to be part of that conversation with you.
And there's all your stuff. And I think that's it.
I really want to thank the two of you for being with us today. It is a lot. It's a lot to digest, and especially when this is not really your realm of expertise, but I'm sure you'll get a lot of calls after this. I'm sure we will. Maybe we'll do a part 2. So, and I want to thank everybody else for joining us today. This is really important information that you need to know to protect your nonprofit organization. So if you have any questions, Kim, Josh, feel free to put your LinkedIn up there if you'd like. Otherwise, you're always welcome to call the Nonprofit Resource Hub office or email us, and we will make sure we get you connected with RoundTable Technologies. So for now, I'd like to thank you both. And again, I'm sure you'll be getting plenty of follow-up, and perhaps we'll do a part 2. So have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Drop my LinkedIn in here.
Oh, there we go.
And also, yeah, outreach at Roundtable also, and the hub knows, they always know where to find us.
We do. And please, if you are not a nonprofit partner with the hub, join today, because you will have access to all sorts of amazing support systems, just like this webinar. So I've left all the information on the screen for you, but feel free to give us a call or an email if you need anything. So once again, thank you both very much. Josh's link is up there. And if you need anything, let us know.
And Allison, I just want to say, I just dropped the link. People want to grab that. That's to the Menti that everybody just saw. So you can also see the responses that everybody else had to those engagements, as well as the slides that we demonstrated. But again, all the resources at that link we gave you. So
excellent. And we're already getting great feedback. So excellent job, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
All right.
Bye.
Bye now.